Today, we're going to review the Britains Deetail U.S. Infantry and their support sets of World War II. War is, of course, a terrible thing, but for the innocent kids in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, World War II was just the source of some great toys.
And these guys, they were among the best. Today, we're going to take you through each figure, vehicle, and playset of Britains Deetail World War II U.S. Infantry on Collector Guys.
Collector Guide.
You can watch a full overview of the Britains Deetail line here. We've reviewed the past of Britains before, but here's the history in just a few lines. Britains, or William Britains, had dominated the toy soldier markets for decades with their excellent hollow cast metal toy soldiers. They successfully moved into plastic toy soldiers by purchasing another company, Herald, and marketing their figures. Then they released their revolutionary Swap-It figures. But the extensive production and related costs of Swap-Its, plus new technologies, led them to make the Deetail line. Deetail had excellent sculpting, giving them a feeling of movement, of motion. They were more realistic looking, had tough paint, and the metal stands that allowed them to stand, well, almost anywhere. And often overlooked, Britains used a simple stroke of genius to market the figures. They always produced both sides of every battle or war, so the playability was built right in. So when it was time to launch the new Deetail Toy Soldiers line, what conflict did Britains release first? World War II. As horrible as it was, almost everyone in the key Britains markets at that time knew a neighbor, father, uncle, or aunt that had served. And from the 1940s through the 1970s, there were many popular movies and TV shows about the war, which fueled kids' demand for World War II toys. Today, we're focusing on the US figures, and we'll go in the order that the main sets were released, including all their vehicles and guns. Last, we'll look at the playsets. We will also mention the main access sets that were released, but we'll go into detail on them in another video. Also, there were other releases of these figures, reuses of the molds, but this video only focuses on the World War II figures that were part of the original line, so roughly that means from 1971 to 1989, the year the original World War II figures were last produced.
I'm also including one item that was actually part of the earlier Herald line, but it was sold alongside the Deetail figures, so we're going to include it. However, we're not going to include any single Herald figures that were put out earlier. Enough background, let's get to it!
The fact is, the first Britains Deetail set was released in 1971, and based on its position in the catalog, it was the U.S. Infantry of World War II. From its first release, this was a very popular part of the line, and because of its strong sales, it lasted a long time. First, the poses. These are my descriptions, action or posed, followed by weapon. These U.S. Infantry, or GIs as they were nicknamed, were released in sets of 6. That is the Deetail standard for their sets. The 6 figures are firing machine gun, swinging rifle, advancing with rifle, standing firing rifle, running with rifle, kneeling firing rifle. All had paper star stickers on their helmets, but these quickly wore off. In fact, most of the figures you see in this video are missing their helmet stickers. These figures used a plug-in arm, which was glued into place. So all these figures required 2 molds. These figures were molded in basic green plastic, then had 3 colors painted on. Brown for the rifles or machine guns, canteens, boots, and bayonets. Yellow for their ammo belts and gaiters. And finally, a peach color for the skin tones on their faces and hands. The original Britains Deetail figures did not have painted on eyes or mouths. Peter Cole's book, Suspended Animation, reveals that Britains used a tool to add texture to these figures to make the uniforms more realistic and less smooth. Like all Deetail figures, they came out on metal bases, which gave them the ability to stand and fight anywhere. The first of the U.S. Infantry came out on maroon painted bases, as seen in the catalog and shown here, missing one of the figures. That was quickly deemed a mistake by Britains, and within the first year they were switched to an orangish-brown base, which made them look like they were standing on mud or dirt, and was much better. Finally, in 1974, they were switched to the standard Deetail green base. The The majority of the U.S. infantry were released on these. The maroon-based figures are rare, the brown-based figures are a bit hard to find, and the green figures are the most common. Note that the figures themselves did not change, just their painted bases. None of the figures had bayonets on their rifles, which is a pretty accurate touch. As a group, the U.S. infantry was good, but they were a bit stiff, and although a triumph, they had the feeling that they were the first designs of the line, and that improvements could be made. And appearing alongside the U.S. infantry in 1971 as the second ever detail set was their European foe, the German infantry of World War II, Set 1. German infantry Set 2 came out in 1977. And the GI's Pacific enemy, the Japanese infantry, came out in 1973. Also in 1973, the U.S. infantry got some heavy weapon support, the U.S. Recoilless Rifle and Team. Matching the current troops, this first was released on the orange stand designed just for it. It soon switched to the green as well. This was a two-man team with a die-cast metal gun that used a spring to shoot the green plastic shells. The two men operating it are an enlisted man and an officer holding field glasses and directing the fire. Both are original molds for this set and painted as other U.S. World War II infantry figures. The recoilless rifle officer and the enlisted man were never released as single figures. You can find these figures on single stands, like this guy, but it means that a collector removed them from the original base to this single one. The Recoilless Rifle Team lasted through 1986. In 1981, Britons released the second version of the U.S. infantry. You can argue that at least a part of these are just revisions of the earlier figures. 3 of the first figures, standing firing rifle, firing machine gun, and running with rifle were retained but were redone into slightly different larger figures. Also, each was now a single mold. Eliminated completely were kneeling shooting rifle, swinging rifle, and advancing with rifle. The all-new figures that were added were throwing grenade, stabbing with rifle, and firing bazooka. The change was probably an attempt to cut production costs by having the U.S. infantry become single mold figures, no more plug-in arms. However, the new set does have all action poses, so perhaps increased playability was another goal in this change. One thing of note on these figures, they were all produced in China, and there is some shade variations in the green plastic. These figures only came on the standard green painted stands. There were no changes to the Recoilless Rifle Team. These figures came loose in counter packs, in blister cards like this, and in box sets. By combining the 2 U.S. infantry sets, kids could have 12 different figures. This set 2 lasted until 1989. A quick recap of the figures. If the ones you're looking at have a red or maroon base, they are the rare 1st U.S. infantry. But make sure the stand has not been repainted. It should be unpainted on the bottom. If it has an orangish-brown stand, it came next, then the green stands. If the figure has a plug-in arm, it was from the first version. If it has no plug-in arm, it is from the second version. Now for the vehicles. This U.S. assault craft was actually part of the earlier Herald line and predated the Deetail U.S. infantry. The first version was available from 1970 to 1975, but Britons marketed and sold it alongside the detail figures, so we will include it. The Herald version of the assault craft is light green, carries 2 U.S. infantrymen figures in dark green uniforms and helmets dabbed with brighter green paint for camouflage. The front figure holds an M3 submachine gun and is ready to fire. The rear soldier is steering the boat and holds an M1 carbine. The craft floated in water, giving it excellent playability. The right side has a single green sticker that says US 73. Again, the assault craft came out in 1970. And in less than a year later, Britons introduced the Deetail U.S. infantry, and although in lighter green plastic, they are sculpted just like the figures from this Herald craft. Around 1976, Britons re-released the assault craft. The two figures now came in lighter green plastic and had the detail helmet stickers, making them fit in perfectly with the U.S. infantry figures. Interestingly, this is the only way to get a figure that fits in the line that is using a carbine version of the M1. The assault craft itself still came in the earlier light green plastic, but the side sticker was changed to US 76. Perhaps a subtle nod to the year the version came out, the bicentennial of the United States. The final version of the assault craft saw Britons alter the boat to a white plastic. No changes were made to the figures, and the sticker remained green and still said US 76. The U.S. assault craft was grounded in 1980. Britons roared out the U.S. Army motorcycle in 1972. It is clearly part of the detail line. It is a U.S. Harley-Davidson motorcycle with a U.S. infantry rider. This guy was perfect for sending orders to the front, or maybe smashing through a German roadblock. The motorcycle is a mix of die-cast and plastic parts. Later, Britons changed the rifle on the rider from one that was attached by a loop to a peg on his back to one that simply plugged into the hole on his back. Sadly, the U.S. Army motorcycle ended its road trip in 1981. The U.S. infantry got its biggest vehicle firepower boost with the 1977 release of the U.S. Jeep. The U.S. Jeep came with two detail figures, a driver and a standing M60 gunner. This is a fun toy. It has great realistic design, rolls smoothly, and man, that gunner is ready for trouble. It is by far the most exciting of all the World War II vehicles. The first version came with dark green wheels, and it was always shown that way in the catalogs. But around 1980, Britain switched the Jeep to white wheels. The Jeep ended its run in 1986. Britons did not produce any tanks for the detail line. Technically, American forces did use helicopters in World War II, but it was in a limited role, and it was not the Hughes 300C featured in this model, which came out in 1979. So this Hughes 300C helicopter, while technically not used in World War II, certainly was marketed as part of the World War II line. Britons made the vehicle as part of their popular police and farm lines, so they must have figured why not repurpose the molds and release it as part of the military line as well. The copter itself is very complex, one of the most complex toys in fact they'd ever made, including spinning rotors. It was pricey and came into the details line as Britain were seeing the sales start to slow down. Because of this cost, small sales, and limited availability, it is sought after by collectors. It ended its run in 1988. For heavy support, the U.S. troops got some serious guns and howitzers. Most of these came out in the 1960s, well before the detail line, so we won't focus on their release dates. First, there was the pack howitzer, which could be towed by Britain's vehicles. It also came in a version where the trails could be split. Then came the United States 155mm gun, which is just a monster of a toy. It fired plastic shells from a spring-loaded shell case, ejected the rounds after firing, and had removable wheels. This is a big toy. There were other World War II guns you could get to support your GIs, but they were officially British. You could use your US infantry to face their enemies among Britain's two playsets for World War II. First, there is the Army Bombed Building Set. It came in this box. Here's the bombed building set with our GIs defending it. The set consists of snap-together walls and a ceiling that form two battle-blasted buildings. Along with this came two fence sections, a single tree, two stoplights, and two signs. Here we see them with the stickers applied to them. This set came with British and German infantry figures, but it was made for use with the American infantry as well. Also available was the famous Battleground set. Battleground was designed to be a European village during the war. To me it screams French village in Normandy. The kid lucky enough to find and buy this awesome toy got all the pieces of the Army Bomb building set, plus this vacuum-formed play base with cobblestone roadway, stone walls, firing positions, and mortar pit. The Battleground also came with British and German figures, but it too was made for the US infantry. Here, our Yanks seize the town with a Solido Sherman tank from that era in support. One reason that the detail figures are such amazing toys is their combination of exciting sculpture and incredible durability. Most of the GIs you see, with the exception of their missing helmet stickers, look like they came right out of the box. The plastic does not become brittle and the paint does not flake off. Amazing.
Well, that's it. The U.S. Infantry of World War II by Britains Deetail. A classic.
More guides to the Britains Deetail World War II line is coming. As mentioned, these molds were used for a lot more figures, and still are, but that's for another time. Here on the channel we have guides to Detail 7th Cavalry, the Foreign Legion, and the entire Detail line. Take a look. Want to see a specific detail set next? Let us know below. And if you want to get notified about our new videos, please click that button and subscribe. Thanks for watching, Collector Guys, and remember, surround yourself with the things you love.